Hey guys, I just wanted to reach out to you and let you know that Surewinder is still selling amazing products. Some of you guys have been dragging your feet for whatever reason. If your shoulder hurts, do not waste time. Pull the trigger. I just bought 4 or 5 of them, and we had 2 guys out. You know how much it cost me to pay for 2 guys being out with bad shoulders? We just pulled the trigger and we said, listen, everybody's going to have one on a truck. It's mandatory. You got to use it. Don't hesitate. Don't wait till your guys go down. It's going to cost you more. Buy a Surewinder.
What's up, everyone? Ryan here, Torsion Talk podcast. Today, we're going to go over some things that I think might be really important to you over the next few months with everything going on in the world. We have an insider who has some data for us, and I'm going to bounce some ideas and some questions off of him that hopefully he can give us some answers to, and if not, we'll try to find them somewhere else. But you guys may be familiar with Brian Buckalew. He has been on here. He's from Majestic Steel. He's great because he keeps his thumb on the pulse for the economy, the steel market, and as you know, both of those things really involve us and what we deal with. So, Brian, glad to have you back.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Ryan.
Yeah. So I'm going to drink my coffee while we chat in my Uline Yeti. And I think everybody in the garage door industry that's ordered from Uline gets a free Yeti cup. So I promise it's coffee. I don't know if you can see that. I see these videos of people drinking and they teach you to blow on it to make it look like it's coffee, but they're drinking alcohol in their Zoom meetings. Have you seen those little videos?
No, I haven't, but that I'm going to have to YouTube that. It's kind of funny. I'm questioning whether or not there's some Baileys in that coffee of yours.
There may be. There may be. No, I do like Baileys in my coffee, but not today. So, Brian, first I want to tackle something that may be outside of your kind of territory, but I want to just address these potential port closings. How does that affect the steel industry? How could that trickle down to us? And in what ways do you see that affecting things for you guys?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. We were talking about that the other day. I think October 1st is when the workers could just basically walk off the ports there. Over the last I guess 7 or 8 months, we've seen an influx of foreign steel coming into the United States. So, kind of going back a little bit, China is really, struggling with overcapacity. A lot of their steel mills are struggling financially, maybe even going into bankruptcy. And they just have too many steel mills to produce what they really need, and their economy is struggling. The government's putting in more help for these companies, but they are struggling. And what happens is when China is not utilizing the steel that they're producing, they're sending it around the world. And so where the frustration is with here in the U.S. is that we think that some of these other countries that are bringing steel in are using Chinese steel, and then they're just, either converting it over to a different type of steel, whether it's galvanized, which is what's used in the garage door industry or other products. And so that's where the frustration is. So there has been a lot of foreign steel coming into the country, and there are trade cases that are looking to be put huge amounts of tariffs on these countries that are bringing in steel, whether it's coming in from Vietnam or Turkey or a number of other countries. Canada is another one. And so there's a rush for all of these countries to get the steel already into the U.S. before the tariffs hit. But what the interesting thing that's happening is that if these dock workers go on strike or they stop working on October 1st, and then the steel doesn't get through to the port, Well, then how do you? And then these tariffs get put in play. How is that all going to come into play with the steel market? So, that's just one thing. But the whole thing with the dock workers, in the Gulf Coast and the East Coast, will greatly, if they go on strike, it will greatly impact what's happening here. I've even heard the term on LinkedIn from some analysts that they're calling it, maybe it's the next black swan. So again, not trying to overinflate this, kind of like the weather we've had here, but yeah, I mean, it is pretty critical.
Well, the investors need a black swan, right? It's that time.
You know what? I would have to agree. I mean, I think the supply chain people are feeling too comfortable, and when they're feeling comfortable, then you don't see a lot of urgency to move forward with things. They will tend to sit and sit and sit. So I don't know if this would be something that would propel people to make decisions. But I can tell you that a lot of the people that we deal with that are buying offshore material right now, historically, have actually been coming back to the table and buying domestic material through us. So I think between the whole dock workers thing and and what's happening with these potential trade cases, that's bringing a lot of people that typically buy foreign steel back to the table. So we'll see how it all kind of shakes out. But yeah, that's just one thing that's going on in the market. There's so many things to consider right now. So much.
Let's get to some of these other things. But before we do, I want to ask you a question. Is the anticipation of these tariffs based on something the current administration is doing, or is the world anticipating that Trump is going to get into office and create these massive tariffs, and they're trying to get it all in before that happens?
I think it has to do more with the current administration. There's, in the United States, ever since the first tariff that Trump put in back in 2018 for the Section 232, the domestic steel industry has put in a lot more capacity, has developed a lot more capacity. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're making more money. You're seeing Nucor, really expand their portfolio of steelmaking. You're seeing Steel Dynamics do the same thing. You're seeing Big River Steel, doing the same thing as well. They're all expanding. In fact, down in, you'd be surprised with this, but in Mississippi County, which is in Blytheville, Arkansas area, Blytheville, Osceola, that whole area there, that is the largest steel producing county in the United States. So you would think that the largest producing steel state would be Pennsylvania, or the county where Pittsburgh is, but it's actually in Arkansas, which kind of shows you how our industry has.
Yeah, that's crazy. Mm-hmm. So talk to me about, before all this came about, you had sent me an email with a report that was pretty eye-opening anyway. So tell me a little bit about, we addressed the ports and the staff there and some of the things going on. But prior to that being on my radar, you had already sent me some stuff that I thought was pretty important for us to cover. You want to dive into some of the stuff that you sent me previously?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch. Obviously, you've got the trade cases, you've got the port situation, but another thing to consider too is what's going to happen with U.S. Steel. U.S. Steel, which has been around forever, is trying to be purchased by a Japanese company, which would be Nippon Steel. And the interesting thing is that Nippon Steel is looking to put a lot of money into innovation to get U.S. Steel to produce steel a little bit more efficiently and to be more competitive in the industry. There has been a backlash from the United Steelworkers, as well as other politicians that are out there in the industry that do not want U.S. Steel to be owned by a Japanese company. And so when you're hearing this, initially you're like, oh yeah, we can't have that. But what's interesting is that there's already Japanese owned steel companies here in the United States to begin with. Japan is actually a friendly competitor or an ally of the United States. And this company here is looking to go ahead and put more money into U.S. Steel to make them successful. So they're coming with good intentions. I think it's been a big political grandstanding opportunity for whether it be Donald Trump. Previously, it was Joe Biden. They both said they would block the sale, and now Kamala Harris had said that she would block the sale. But recently, like in the last week or so, the president has decided to put off making a decision on blocking the sale for another 3 or 4 months, which just coincides with the election. So that more or less it's a political type thing. Most of the people that are in the steel industry, whether you're buying steel or selling steel, they are in favor of this sale because it's going to help the domestic steel industry in the United States. So, bringing someone like Japan in to do that is a big thing. So that would be a big thing to keep an eye on is what's going to happen with U.S. Steel, because if by hook or crook it gets blocked by the president, U.S. Steel has already said they're going to be going ahead and closing facilities already. So if they decide to close facilities because the sale doesn't go through, well, then it's going to further consolidate the steel industry. So that's something to watch right now.
So, like everything, I mean, you kind of have this consolidation happening across the board, right? You have it in the garage door industry, you got it in all the home service industries. I mean, you got private equity coming in, buying everybody up. Your industry's consolidating. You're having fewer players, right?
Yep, we have four companies that control over 75% of the production in the United States right now.
Where do you see all this going, this consolidation?
I think we're going to have fewer players, but they're all going to be producing more steel. You can see the expansion happening right now with what Nucor, Big River, and SDI are doing. I would just say that from what I'm seeing is you're going to have fewer players, but you're going to have each one of them producing more. I anticipate for next year that there will be much more capacity for producing steel next year than there was this year. And in years past, there's more production coming online. So I would say what will end up happening is it will continue to be like this. It will continue to be these well-run companies. Nucor and SDI are extremely well. The ones that really run their companies really well are going to be the ones that are going to survive. So I would say this Nippon Steel, that's why everybody's in favor of it, because I think they're going to run U.S. Steel a little bit better than what we've seen. And I think they're going to make the steel industry better. So I think you're going to be seeing more with less players.
Okay. Would that drive the prices down more, or you think it'll hold steady?
Good question. I see where the market's going. It's too early to tell because you've got all this capacity coming online, but we're not sure what's going to happen with demand. That is the big thing. And that's the thing I'm sure that keeps you up at night. Like, where's demand going to be? I mean, you've had interest rates rise for a good while now. Now they've fallen by, 50 base points. But I think from my vantage point is that I think that the election is going to be the thing that's going to cause where things go. I mean, if no matter who gets elected, you want to know kind of where we're headed. And I give you an example in a different industry, in the agriculture industry. Typically they're getting through with their harvest and they're going through how much money they're going to spend on equipment for next year so they don't have to pay taxes on the money that they've made. So, but right now commodity prices are low and interest rates are high, so they're kind of holding out and not spending that money. So, from my vantage point, the election and interest rates are going to be the big thing. I'm not to get political, but obviously if Donald Trump comes in to be president, the three things he's going to do is he's going to figure out a way to lower interest rates. He's going to figure out a way to lower your taxes, especially corporate taxes. And then he's going to figure out a way to handle inflation, which I think he probably thinks the big thing with inflation is going to be, gas prices. Is he going to, work on building out that Keystone pipeline again and drill, baby, drill, like he said? That's going to be the big driver. And then with Kamala Harris, we still have to see exactly what she's going to do. So we're
not really sure because she doesn't answer the question. But
you said that, not me. But I agree with you.
Yeah. But what I'll say is that I never really realized how much energy affects the prices of everything, right? So when energy prices go up, everything goes up because it costs more to produce. And so now that that's been brought to my attention, like it makes total sense. And again, not to get political, but I think what we see, this flip-flopping, which is not good for our country, right? Where you have one party just has these dramatically different views than the other party, and we have no consistency. We just got these flip-flopping. And what it appears to be from my point of view is you have, like, when the Democrats are in office, you have a tendency to have like this ideal of a dependency. Like, I kind of feel like they want us to be a little bit dependent on the government. And then with some Republicans the same way. I think what's unique about Donald Trump is he preaches, I don't know if he wants or not, but he preaches the idea of small government, give the power back to the people. And if that's the case, then dependency is not there for the government as much. So I'm a huge fan of eliminating the IRS. I think that like our taxes would drop significantly if we didn't have to cover all the payrolls for them. And so I'm a big fan of that. There's a lot of policies in place or being talked about that I think could be hugely beneficial and also help with inflation and interest rates and everything else. So what happens when we talk about energy and fuel? What happens when we have cut off our fuel that we're producing here, right? And then the port shut down. How does that affect the steel industry? I know gas prices are probably going to shoot through the roof, but how does that affect you guys?
It would. I mean, it would affect us positively and negatively. And I would say from the positive standpoint, being that Majestic is a very, very dynamic company, and that we will inventory material so that you don't have to take the risk on inventorying it, because there's huge risk in inventory. I think the fact that we're very forward thinking and can kind of predict that, as we've seen during the pandemic when we had the highest inventory that we ever had. I think from our vantage point, it would be good, because anytime there's disruption in the industry, we thrive. And people are like, oh my God, I need help. We're there to help them. I think that what will end up happening is there will be no offshore material coming into the country if there's no workers. I think if gas prices go up, obviously the transportation cost is going to go up, but it's still not going to change the fact that people need product to manufacture. And so from that vantage point, I think it will kind of, just like with everything else, it all kind of evens itself out. So like I would say, like during the Ukraine war, when this happened, and I think was on your podcast when that first happened, and scrap went up dramatically. But then it came down dramatically because companies were able to go ahead and come up with substitutes for raw materials that weren't coming in from Ukraine. So, we always adapt in one way or another. Even during COVID, we all adapted. So whatever situation comes up, circumstantially, companies will adapt. And, it's like what Billy Beane said in Moneyball, you either adapt or die. And so, I would say that companies will adapt, but I would say that, you will see if the ports are shut down, it will be interesting to see how things go. I think costs will be up, but I think it's going to hurt demand too, because one thing we saw when the ports were backed up during COVID was that companies that produce like very high end product and they need that one little piece of whatever it is, a circuit breaker or whatever that goes into your generator. And Generac, hypothetically, I'm just using them as an example, not saying that this happened to them, but just using them as an example. If they needed that one piece, well, they've got all these finished goods that are waiting on that one piece to ship before they can go ahead and start shipping product to their clients. Therefore, they can't get any revenue in. But in the meantime, the whole supply chain's backed up because they committed to buying steel from XYZ company out there, and they can't take the steel in because they haven't shipped what they've got. So I think it'll be very, very interesting. It'll be interesting how it affects each particular industry.
Hey guys, I found something that changed my business and I want to share it with you. We've created packages that have included some of the best products in our industry to offer our service customers. The heart of that package is Stealth Hardware Kit. Stealth Hardware is the quietest hinges on the market. I challenge you to buy at least one of these, test it for yourself. Put it on your truck and design a quiet performance package for your customers willing to pay for a better, smoother running door. Buy your Stealth Hardware Kit at Service Spring, do a search for quiet hinge, and then buy that. You can buy a double or single door, 7 or 8 foot tall, and promise you, it'll change your service forever.
Somer USA and Somer Group want to thank you for an incredible year and the trust you put in them and their products. As you know, Somer places high value on relationships, education, customer service, innovation, and professionalism. And they are grateful to you for your part in the fostering and dissemination of these values. If there is any way Somer can support you in your journey, whether through their products, the values they hold to, or the knowledge Somer has gained through interaction with door dealers across the world, please reach out to the team at your convenience. They are here to serve you. Again, thank you from the entire Somer team. Check them out at somerusa.com. Tell them Ryan sent you.
So from a garage door dealer perspective, I would put us in the category of Generac in that example. You're the kind of the end user, the installing dealer, the, whatever, the distributor to the public. And so that could massively affect us. Tell me a little bit about the pricing of the steel being used for garage doors, which historically, I think what we've talked about was, if I'm not mistaken, is galvanized. And also, there was one other one that I think you said too. Was it pig steel?
Well, that was there's pig iron that's used in making the steel, but primarily for your industry, whether you're making the garage door track or if you're buying a painted garage door, it's hot dip galvanized. That's going to be used in your manufacturing. And so, like right now, hot dip galvanized as far as the reading for September was the lowest that we've seen all year. So we are at a low point. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that demand has kind of fallen off a little bit. There has been offshore material that's come into the country. So I would say that, yeah, it was at the lowest point on September 11th. So, however, we get into this time of year where the mills do their maintenance outages, whether they're planned or unplanned. They're doing, they're going to be shut down for 2 weeks to maintenance it. It's kind of like, when you're in a race car and you're driving around the racetrack and you've got to go ahead and do a pit stop. So they're doing a pit stop. So each one of the mills are doing some sort of maintenance between now and
This is historically y'all's slow season anyway, then, right? I mean, if they're planning this during this period of time.
That's what the way they envision it. I would say our industry is becoming less cyclical than it used to be, just simply because I think COVID's changed all of that. So normally where you would see Q3 and Q4, dead, it's a little bit busier than it usually is. So, but again, this quarter, Q3 and Q4, as we finish up Q3 and head into Q4, demand may still be just kind of okay. But with these outages that are taking place, every time that they go ahead and take an outage, well, then the lead times jump out. So like, for instance, if you wanted to order steel today, you would get it for hot dip galvanized product, what you buy, you would be getting it in like a mid to late November. So you're still looking at almost 6 to 8 weeks before you get it. That's pretty much, in my opinion, kind of average for hot dip galvanized is 6 to 8 weeks. When it starts to get to 10 to 12 weeks, that's when the pricing is really high. So as you're looking at lead times to get steel, the further out they go, the higher the price goes. So
you could see a slight increase here in the near future, just because plants are shutting down. They're going to fall a little bit behind because orders are still going to come in. And so that's a slight uptick in the price of that, correct?
Correct. And we've actually seen that. So if the CRU index for which measures the price of steel for hot dip galvanized was at 43.30 on September 11th, and today it's at 44.70. So you're seeing a difference there of $1.40. So roughly, as we're looking at it, 3% increase.
Are you able to buy futures with steel, like investments? Yeah. You are? That's interesting.
Yeah.
I figured that would be the case.
That has really come into play over the last 5 to 6 years. The one thing about the steel industry is they're slow a lot of times to new ideas and technology. But I do think with a lot of the influx that we've seen from younger people coming into the industry, there's been a new ideas in sourcing steel, new ideas as it pertains to innovation and raw material investment and raw material management. So I mean, I've seen that just in the last 5 years.
Okay.
Even supply chain management is really heavy in steel right now. It's funny, 10, 15 years ago, the plant manager was buying steel. Today, the plant manager is focusing on manufacturing. There's a supply chain team that's now in charge of that. So that kind of causes a little bit of a change in the way that steel is bought and sold these days.
Yeah, probably more analyst driven, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah. All right. So next question, you said that steel, galvanized steel is like the type that our manufacturers would be buying is at a pretty low rate right now. Definitely lowest for the year, I think you said.
Mm-hmm.
How does this compare to, let's say, 2019 pre-COVID? How does the price point today compare to kind of that average of 2019?
Great question. So actually, I have this document here. If I go to 2019, so today on September 11th, it was at 43.30 of 2024. If we went to the same time period of September 11th of 2019, that number was 38.05. So you're looking at a difference of 12% between the same date in 2019 to the same date of 2024.
So what about, do you deal with aluminum too?
No, unfortunately, we don't. And I don't know much about aluminum and don't know much about stainless either.
Okay. So let's say the garage door manufacturers are buying, right? I'm sure they're buying on, like, the price being passed to them is probably a little bit delayed. They have inventory that's also sitting, right?
Yeah.
So we're probably, as the dealers, the steel that we're buying was probably purchased maybe 8 months, a year ago. Would you say?
Probably 6 months ago, because
6 months?
you got to get it in, you got to get it painted. So, and that's a great question, because if you look at 6 months ago, the same $43.30 steel today was 6 months ago on March 13th was at 56.60. So you've seen pricing go down by 23%, 23.5% since March of this year.
Yeah. And I don't think it's talked about enough, but, after COVID, between 2020 and 2022, like beginning of 2022, we saw 100% increase on our material for garage doors.
Right.
And when it didn't go back down, when steel went back down dramatically, the response that we get is, oh, well, labor went up, so we have to compensate for labor, but not at the rate, not at the rate of steel, right? So if labor and steel went up both 100%, then they would have raised prices to 200% and then cut it back down 100%, or 50% of that increase, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, we've talked in the past about there's something that we can ask for from our manufacturers that will give us what they paid, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
or what the
Mm-hmm.
hard cost landed is or whatever, and that they should know that because they have analysts and buyers and sellers and all that stuff. What was that? Can you refresh us on that?
Yeah, it's a cost model. So anybody that's in supply chain management now a lot of times forces their suppliers to go through a cost model exercise where you show, how much you're paying for steel, how much you're paying for freight, how much you're paying for paint, how much you're paying for fabrication, and even to the point of how much profit margin you're putting on it. So imagine you as a business owner, Ryan, and you're dealing with a client, and you have to tell them how much money you're making on your product. That's kind of unnerving to the average business owner, that's out there. But unfortunately, in any industry, not just the garage door, but in any industry, we're seeing a lot of that happen these days, which which is for some people it's frustrating. So I mean, if you're a private owner of a company, and you got to tell your client how much money you're making on them, it causes some issues. I mean, that's where it is. And I think eventually you guys are going to figure it out that, hey, you know what, we need to figure out a way to know what the cost is for what we're paying. So I think eventually that will probably head down to you. Whether or not who's going to be the person that's going to lead that type of charge is going to actually have to have some leverage. So whether that means that it's a buying group that's going together, or if it's a large buyer of garage doors, that's kind of where it would need to go.
Yeah. I'm seeing that more and more on the commercial side of things, especially
Mhm.
new construction. When we do a new construction job, they want lien releases, and they want lien releases from the manufacturers sometimes
Mhm.
with the cost that we paid for the doors, which is, I don't know. Yeah, like you said, private or mostly private companies. Speaking of private and public, there was a question that I thought of earlier that I didn't ask. You had mentioned that the multiple presidents, even considering the current president or vice president, whoever's doing the job now, is shooting down the or plans to shoot down the acquisition from the Japanese company to. I assume that they can only really truly do that if it's a publicly traded business. Is that steel company that's potentially being acquired is a publicly traded business, right?
Absolutely. U.S. Steel is for sure.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought.
Yep.
All right. So if you were a garage door business owner and you're looking out 3-6 months, what are you preparing for, and what are some things that we should have in mind?
I would say that demand, I would expect to be conservative. I think everybody's going to be conservative with their money. I think the end users are all going to be conservative. I think that it goes without saying you got to keep track of what's going on with the election. I think keeping track of what's going on with the port is huge, and I think keeping track of what's going on with the interest rates. So I know that's a terrible answer, but it's there's just so much unknown right now.
Yeah.
So many of our clients are like, I can't forecast what we're going to do next year. I don't know what's going to happen with the election. I don't know what's going to happen with interest rates. There's a large contingent of people, whether they're right or wrong, that do believe that if Donald Trump becomes president, that the economy is just going to go boom and take off.
I don't know if it's going to blow up, but it's definitely going to be significantly better than what we have. And I don't think that a lot of people with economic or business background would argue that in most cases.
Correct. And so I think, in years past, I've always downplayed that whole thing of, oh, it's an election year. It's an election year. I'm not doing anything. It's an election year. I'm like, okay. But this year, as well as last time with Biden and Trump, and even to an extent when it was Trump and Hillary, I do see it because we're so, as a country, we're so divided.
Yeah.
We're not really seeing a whole lot of middle ground on anything. And so we're either going to go one way or the other.
Right.
But going back to what I was saying earlier, businesses usually figure out a way to adapt. And so I think no matter who gets elected, businesses will adapt. Now, will they adapt in a conservative way if it goes one way, or will they adapt and go all in if it's the other way? So I don't know. I mean, it's a tough situation. I think at this point, what I see with companies are the ones that are focusing on. I'm not a big process and procedure guy. I cringe every time I hear that process and procedure, because I think I'm more, hey, you got to adapt quickly to what you're doing and just cannot just do everything process and procedure. But I do think everybody should be focusing on their clients that they have, the business that they have, and being as effective with their clients as possible. One thing I see with companies is they're focused so much on being efficient that they lose sight of their client. And what ends up happening is the operations guy is pounding his chest of, I did this, and we're more lean and we're more efficient, we're this. And then
you're not flexible.
And then the vice president of sales is, well, that's great. We just lost 20 customers because you did this, this, and this.
Yeah.
And then this huge battle that's happening between operations and sales, and who suffers when that happens? It's the clients. And so, and really the company itself does.
Yeah,
so I think
true.
I think companies, focusing on like what you're doing. I mean, you're trying to give the best customer experience that you can, the best buying experience to every client. You're selling value. You're selling, the value of your garage doors and the experience, and the fact that you're not using a bunch of contractors out there. So I think, from your vantage point, Ryan, and others, I would say, focus on your client all the time. Everything should be client specific. And if you can do that, everything else will kind of take care of itself.
Yeah, that's great advice. I appreciate that. Thank you for coming on the show. It's great having you on. I think our business owners and audiences are going to get a lot out of this. I think it helps us answer some questions in the direction that we're going. I would like to add, if you were still working off similar numbers than you were like the 100% increase, like, would you be banging on your manufacturers to lower costs for you right now?
I think you should. I think you should. Now, I may get in trouble for saying that for my clients, but if I'm being who I am, which is very transparent and an open book, yeah, I mean, I would look at the numbers. I mean, if steel pricing was at $1 a pound during the pandemic, and now it's at, just say, 50 cents a pound or 45 cents a pound, whatever it is, and you haven't seen any kind of price decrease, then yeah, you should be, because I can tell you that the people that are buying the steel are definitely pounding the manufacturers for a better price,
Right.
based on what with COVID, and
Which is
that,
part of their job.
yeah, it's part of their job, just like it's part of your job. I mean, you've got to figure out a way to remove costs, and you've got to figure out a way to say, hey, every dollar that I remove from the bottom line could be potentially better than any sale I make, because I may only make 20% or whatever your gross profit margin is on your sale, but you actually removed this much dollar from the bottom line, which actually goes to show you how valuable supply chain people are.
Absolutely. And guys, when we're talking about this, you think about, let's say you have currently a 10% net profit, just as a round number, and you're able to get your manufacturer to give you a 10 or 15% break on product. If you kept the pricing the same because you're able to sell there, then you just literally doubled your profitability. Maybe not total 100% on the net, because you still got labor and other things to take in consideration. But imagine what you could do with that money. Like, you could invest it back in your business. You could potentially buy a building. You could give it back to the community. You chase your dreams, right? But when we're in business, we're watching pennies and percentage points and fractions of percentage points, trying to constantly get better and streamline these things. And there's only so much, like Brian said, there's only so much you can squeeze out of your systems, right, before you start to affect sales and you start to affect operations and overall satisfaction, and even employees, in my opinion. They feel so squeezed in a funnel or a tunnel that they can't make decisions. And so it gets really tight and gets a little frustrating. So I think a lot of this comes down to just a few things. These are my key takeaways. Number one, I think we should go to our manufacturers and really have a respectful conversation in a professional manner. We do not need to go to them and bust their chops and start yelling and screaming at them about pricing. I think we schedule a meeting with decision makers, be really smart about it, come to the table with your facts, and try to negotiate a deal, right? I also think that there's a lot of things that you can do when we talk about operations. There's a lot of companies that'll SOP you to death, to the point where you can't breathe. And at Aaron Overhead Doors, we love SOPs, but at the same time, there's got to be flexibility. For those of you guys who went to Vegas with us and toured Zappos, you learned quickly that some of their SOPs included, be radical, do crazy stuff, have fun, and make decisions that are in the best interest of the customer. And those are difficult to kind of track. And then, as they started collecting money from investors, that became a little bit less and less. And they started having to get approval for things, and, they tightened the ropes a little bit. But in the grand scheme of things, like, what got them there was this ability to be more than an employee and go out and thrive and do great things and give back and be a human to other humans. And I think that gets lost a lot these days in business. So these are my key takeaways. Also, the fact that we might be dealing with some gas shortages soon. We might be dealing with gas prices shooting through the roof. And if we start to see this, I think we have to adjust our prices accordingly to compensate for the added cost of fuel. Also keep in mind, like we've had this scare before, but if there's gas shortages, we're heavily dependent on getting to people's homes. And we're already feeling a little bit of pinch, especially on the new door side across the country, because people are pulling back. There's a lot of uncertainty with the elections coming up. But historically, we've seen the last 2 months prior to the election is not great. And then historically, the next 30 days. So you have a 3-month run there. And really, unfortunately for us, like Air and Overhead Doors, our historical slow months are July and August. And then we had this shooting 20 minutes down the road, which definitely affected business. So we had July, August slow, September slow, and now we're rolling into October and election. So we're trying to weather the storm. I think if we can make it to, December, January, you're going to have some sort of pent up demand that should release a little bit, just because of the simple fact that nobody's been spending, and some of them have to. So it's going to happen, hopefully. And anything you want to add, Brian?
No, I think that's a great strategy, and I appreciate you having me on the podcast. This has been fun, and if you'd like to talk after the election and or the first of next year, we can chat and see how things are shaping up, because obviously the world keeps going no matter what. So you just have to keep moving forward.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and taking the time to share this information and all these ideas that we discussed. Obviously, you guys can take from it what you will, but I want you guys to be safe, have fun out there. Don't forget to have fun, because if you're not having fun, it's not worth it. Have a wonderful day. Talk to y'all later.